if some of you will be, if some of you will get the instruction to visit anybody at home or not. We haven't gotten that instruction yet, and it may not even occur, or it may be few, or it may be none. But we have gotten an instruction of something that is related to that we would like for you to do. All of those that feel that it would serve any purpose to do. In other words, to relieve any anxiety. And we're going to put some stationery in your craft, and envelopes and papers that match, not fancy, just some, maybe some different colors with stationery. And you will write a letter to whomever you think it would relieve them to hear from you. But you'll write it strictly if some of you will be, if some of you will get the instruction to visit anybody at home or not. We haven't gotten that instruction yet, and it may not even occur, or it may be few, or it may be none. But we have gotten an instruction of something that is related to that we would like for you to do. All of those that feel that it would serve any purpose to do. In other words, to relieve any anxiety. And we're going to put some stationery in your craft, and envelopes and papers that match, not fancy, just some, maybe some different colors with stationery. And you will write a letter to whomever you think it would relieve them to hear from you. But you'll write it strictly as you would write a one-way conversation. In other words, not bringing up anything about you can write me at such and such, or you're just writing it as if you were on a trip someplace. And I'm not saying that you're going to tell them you're on a trip, but you would write it as if you say you were going to Europe and you were writing people at different stops, and you knew that you couldn't get anything back from them because you wouldn't even be there if they chose to write anything back. So it's a one-way communication. Just to let them know that I hate to even say what to say because we don't want them to any of them to sound like carbon copies. And we might even have you do this with some frequency if we think that it would help the individuals that would appreciate hearing from you once in a while. When we say frequency, maybe once a month or something like that, which wouldn't be an unusual time for anybody that was off to school or anything else.
If it wouldn't affect visitors.
If it wouldn't.
If they just get into writing letters so much that it
right.
kind of change
we want you to write your letter. We won't do any preaching. It won't do any trying to convert them. It won't do anything except be a pleasant expression of your well-being and your concern, and you know of their concern, that kind of thing. So beyond that, we don't want to say what you have to say.
We don't want you to tell them where you are.
No.
Talk about or talk actually about the trip.
Well, we don't want you to talk about the endo, and we don't want to say where you are. And if the only way you could even talk about the trip was as if you did it in terms of doing what you want to do, kind of like your own version of going to school, or however you want to say it, so that it doesn't sound like this trip, in quotes, or this group, in quotes, or this, you know what we're saying? You follow that?
No, we don't want you to spend more than 30 minutes on the letter.
At any time.
At any time. It doesn't mean you spend 30 minutes a day writing a letter. It means that you
The total energy put on it
should be,
wouldn't be more than that.
and we want you to look at it as though you're treating it as though you're writing down a procedure or something. In other words, we don't want you to get into feelings or anything that would cause you to change your vibration.
Don't even need to talk to them in the way that you talked to them when you were last talking to them, because that might cause you to have to lower your vibration a lot, because maybe you talk very sentimentally or emotionally or lovey-poo type talk in your letters. You know, it's very adult talk. It's very objective talk, kind talk, considerate talk. But avoid getting, like you say, into it. Okay?
Yeah, no books are written, just
No lengthy.
And once the letters have been written, then you turn them over to SAT-3 people. And the SAT-3 people, what is it, they're going to let them read it and see if there's nothing's been spelled.
As long as they'll check them out for security and that you didn't get off base. And then they'll send them like
And then we'll drop
fly to
them down.
Nome and drop them off.
At least isn't going to read it. We're going to trust that SAT-3 people are going to take care of it, okay? And then we will see to them that they're nailed. Now, don't send them sealed, just in case we have instruction
To check SAT-3 out, see if they're doing it
first. But the main thing is you all protect them and make sure that nothing is exposed to them at all. Now, again, I want to stress that this is the only instruction that we've had so far. It doesn't mean that we must get an instruction to go visit, but we think you ought to examine yourself and see how this affects you. This instruction meaning.
That's if it's disappointing to you to not go visit, then something was brewing kind of wrong in there.
So, check yourself out, and if you have, then of course you want to correct it. And it might be because of these things that makes that difficulty to project it. We don't know. All we know is what we feel is happening at tomorrow. It may come up that you all should go. And as well as it's been made off the easy part because Continental and gospel prices, we can travel this all over the country for less than $100. In some places, $79. So you wouldn't
In place they fly.
So it isn't the cost of things that's keeping it from whatever the next level is.
They're making it easy in case we do good. Are we through with that topic?
I wish y'all have a question.
Okay, then Sylvia asked a question about whether or not he could bring up in the letter that he had recently seen such and such a movie, and we said that kind of talk is okay. It's
Television shows.
yeah, because that even makes them think that you're not just staying on your knees or on the street corner with your roses or whatever they think.
In other words, it seems more normal, which is that's what we want you all to hear.
Yes, that was a good point, because we would like for them to think that you're not sheltered from what's happening.
Okay, any other questions?
I was going to take
Well, if we don't have any more questions about the letter writing, any other questions about that? Well, I'll tell you what you do. We would like for you all to, if you need addresses, then send the links, names, and towns. And we will try to go to libraries
Library's pretty well.
and see if we can look them up with current telephone books.
Okay.
So if you need addresses, then send us names, initials, and towns, and we'll try to look them up for you. Okay, now Carla, you had a question about segments.
In the process of writing the agenda, I've made mistakes and I'm not sure. I want to get the point across of how the genes work, and I said that the brain is not a conscious mind, nor is it your subconscious mind. It's merely the receiver or the master control center where it receives the impulses from the genes and translates them into emotions and thoughts.
Know that?
Which in turn the brain sends it to the nervous system, and then through the nervous system, which is the wiring of the vehicle, it gives out the effect of feeling to the other part of the vehicle. I thought that was accurate.
That's about as accurate as you can get. And there are a lot of other ways you could express it, but that's not off base. There's something I want to talk about just for a minute. We have and I think one day we talked a little bit about our interest in patriotism to a degree and trying to encourage people towards buying products of the country as against swinging the pendulum the other way. And it disturbed me a little bit after we talked about it, because you could misunderstand that. Because the world should be growing towards a patriotism for forward motion. And that kind of patriotism has no restrictions to nations or borders. And do you follow that? Now, it's true, and there should be a patriotism to quality. And it didn't do the, let's take the auto manufacturers of this country. If they went through a period of making very poor products, and better products could be bought in foreign countries, it didn't do them any harm for people to buy better quality from other countries in order to make them get their quality where it belongs. That's a very healthy thing to do. And but eventually the globe is going to have to act like a nation. The globe is going to have to act like a nation, and it's going to have to stand for quality and progress and the higher values. And so wherever we're patriotic to values more than we are certainly to borders. You follow what we're saying? So because we didn't want you to misunderstand what we have said of having we know that the way things have worked, that the next level has showered a lot of progress on this nation. But that doesn't mean that focus couldn't go elsewhere if this nation abused that or began to not be proper recipients of it. And it doesn't mean that other nations have not also received very strong positive rays, so to speak, or knowledge from the next level. And if it has, then peace is a stronger element there, or quality is a stronger element there, if they have tried to tune in more to what the next level was passing down to them. One other aspect of this is just as in your craft, we're trying to teach you to be opposed to negativism, opposed to destruction, because destruction is negativism, except for the destruction of the negative. Now, you can't be opposed to, you can't be so passive that you're not, or that you're also opposed to keeping a cap on the negative. In other words, you can be so passive, even in your own self, that you don't ward off, you don't actively work against, actually fight against the negative, whatever it is that is trying to destroy you. Therefore, in the world, it is right for the world to be opposed to destruction, opposed to nuclear wars, opposed to nuclear weapons, opposed to aggression, where the people would be worse off than they were prior to that aggression. But you have to be also aggressive for good, don't you? I mean, you have to be aggressive on your own vehicle and force good, sometimes where good would not reign if you didn't force it. And there are times when even nations and countries have to force something better that is more liberating, more permissive of good reigning than other forces that would force negative on it. So what we're saying is there's a right time for aggressiveness. There's a right when it's for the right reason, when it's for the right purpose. And there's right, or it's always right also to be opposed to the destructive and negative forces around the world. The reason we're saying this is because your thinking contributes a lot to what goes out on the radio waves. And it is not right to be always passive, any more than it's right for you to be passive in the forces that would work against you and you'll overcome. You follow that? Did it make any sense in saying those things to you? So you could even think at a human level that if we, which we aren't, but if we, well, in a sense we are, but we're doing it through radio waves instead of with our hands and our mouths. But if we stand to a degree for positive moves, for liberating those that are restricted from being able to grow better. We're for being opposed to those, even aggressively, who would impose their non-liberating forces on parts of the world, who would suppress them and cause them to have little chance of growing properly. We are opposed to destructive forces. Do you follow that? So that will, as you think that way, you will see that we hopefully in the years ahead, maybe not fast enough that you'll be around to see any of it, but that the world will move more quickly, hopefully, toward thinking in terms of the world must have the kind of freedom that is found very few places now. As long as that freedom does not interfere with other people's freedom. For example, a simple thing like smoking. We don't care who goes and smokes. If they aren't smoking where it bothers your health or disturbs anyone, I mean, if they want to smoke, then they've got to do it in a way that it doesn't disturb anyone else. And it's our job to even let them know that they're harming themselves. But we can't force them not to do it. That has to be the right. But we can see that the circumstance doesn't isn't where they're doing what they want to do that's lower than what we want to do, where it doesn't affect us. And that's the same way it is in your craft. If someone's action is lower than what you want to feel, then you can't be affected by it. You've got to protect yourself by it. But you can't help it by fighting it back directly. It's not going to work because they've chosen that action. Do you see what we're saying? Now, if they weren't choosing that action, then you have to take a step in their favor. If they, for example, Grenada, you don't know all the facts about Grenada, but let's say that Grenada was being, that a force was taking over that was against the will of the people, and it was a suppressing negative force. Then isn't it okay for, since the people themselves would choose to be liberated from it, wouldn't it be right for those who stood for a greater freedom than they were being presented to intercede for them and help them out? Can you see how that would have its rightness? As long as the force that is interceding is not going to go in and tell them what they must have. But what, in theory, what the government stands for that calls itself a democratic government or free enterprise government is a very liberating government. And even though I said in theory, in actuality it's more liberating than any government on the face of the globe. We couldn't even do what we're doing as a class anyplace else. Couldn't get away with it. We would be a number someplace that had to show up at the factory and put in our 8 hours and then not listen to anything other than a certain amount of this kind of propaganda and that kind of propaganda. You see what we're saying? So, just wanted to pass those things on so that you would realize that we weren't saying our patriotism was just the borders of this nation. Our patriotism is to righteousness and goodness and quality and forward motion. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. You too? There's vitamin. I don't remember what company's putting it out now, but there's like the Life Extension Program. We had some literature and all from this outfit that's endeavoring to, through nutrition and vitamins and all, to help you extend your life. And they've got some multivitamins I call MaxiLife. And what I'd give anything if we could do it, but I don't know that there's a way we could do it, or that they'd be interested in it. But the physical approach to MaxiLife makes hardly a dent in the lifespan. Even though they can work some toward strengthening weakened vehicles, but they they can do harm because they can, through supplements, take the place of what should be taking place in the vehicle. In other words, all those supplements really shouldn't be happening unless the vehicle is almost beyond the point of refurbishing its own good mechanism. Do you follow that? Because the vehicle was designed to be able to correct its own ills and to get rid of its own weaknesses and become strong in the areas that it was weak in. Even nutrition, because doesn't happen overnight. So, but what would be fun is if we could write this company and say, we really appreciate what you're trying to do in extending life through supplements, and you put a lot of energy in, and we can see the value of it and so forth. But the real maxi-life approach that will make strides more quickly has to include more than the physical approach through supplements and nutrition. It has to be done through getting rid of the destructive, negative, non-nutritional forces of thinking and conduct, changing your habits, your ways of thinking, your conduct with each other, and protecting yourself from destructive things, and so forth. In other words, your whole everything that you have learned in this house could almost be summed up in maxi-life. Do you follow what I'm saying? What is it you're trying to contribute to this globe of maxi-life? Is eternal life ever going to occur until negativity and lower things have gotten totally under control and they're not affecting the minds and vehicles? Of course not. So if you could see it purely from a clinical position, you would see that the quote, maxi-life is what we're all about. You see what we're saying? And we could even say we've had a laboratory experiment of 8 or 9 years of 35 plus people totally controlling their environment and changing their conduct and their ways of thinking and acting and so forth. And we'd like to show you a picture of someone here 6 years ago and here 7 years ago, and here's the picture. And here, no, I'm saying, well, we don't have any more. We had pictures of you all when we started on the trip. I wish we still have. But because most of you have seen very little change, except maybe for the better in your physical appearance. And even though it has been difficult on you, because you had to work so fast and so hard at such odds. In other words, the degree of negativity that you had to work against, that when you became aware of what you had to work against, and how little time, because we were trying to push you to work as fast as you could against that, the stress of that caused, in a sense, a considerable amount of aging or destructive process. But that, aside from that, that's been the only real force that has been any negative to you. Do you follow what we're saying? Is the pressure that you apply. Because there's nothing that could work as successfully toward maxi-life as the conduct that you have tried to convert your thinking to and your actions to. Well, I just don't know.
Well, that's pretty good to walk on the message like this, but
Okay.
we want you all to examine what you all have been accumulating. In other words, remember not very long ago or some time ago we had you all get rid of all excess stuff that you have. And we would like you to check your little belongings and see if you haven't gradually increased little things here and there. Personal, that's right. And we don't feel like individuals should have things in both back VCs or all three VCs if you have three VCs. In other words, you have them in one little spot. If you like your toothbrush, you have a toothbrush. If you have eyeglasses, you have them in one spot. And we don't feel like any individual needs separate containers of things. Like, for instance, if you use Vaseline or there should be a tube of that in the BC.
But it wouldn't be your own, right? That's an example.
So that shouldn't be separate.
None of these should be things that you have your own.
Peroxide, alcohol, all those things you get from the stockpile. Okay? In other words, we don't want all these little bottles of things in 35 people had all separate little containers of things, and each BC we would really be Fibber McGee's closet of these. So what we were trying to set up at the time that we did all this was like you would have this except there would be an area where you would go to get those things as you need them. And if you have any other source, I mean, if for some reason that doesn't work for you, then write to me to let us know that so we can change it for you as an individual. Okay?
We're going to, T and I are going to talk to you another day. First of all, if T doesn't mind, I want to say a couple of things on this tape regarding what we talked to these here about, because I don't know if we want him to hold a meeting or to share it with everybody in crack. There was an incident that occurred in Retreat Crew where some things were brought in, and T said these go to such and such craft because they are a result of a request from this craft. And then many other things were discussed, and maybe even a couple of things, because people weren't paying careful enough attention, even got confused as to whether or not they went to the North Craft. But then when it got actual time to leave, the crew didn't have their heads together. And one person says to another, what do we do with these? Do we split them up? And one person says, well, I don't know. They might have been a result of a request that came from our craft. Somebody else says to someone else, not even in the presence of them, are we to split these up? Are we to divide these up? And then other people come into the picture who even knew that the request had been made, but had momentarily let it drop from their thinking. And so they decided to split up the things and send them back. Now, to us, this indicates, and the only reason we're bringing this up is certainly not to call down the Retreat Crew that this happened to, but to remind all of you that you've got to be more responsible in carrying out procedures. Let's say you were a Set 3 person in the craft where that request came for those items. You're supposed to read all those requests. And I have a suspicion that you all don't read them carefully enough. You just let your eyes pass through them. And if you really read them and they sank, then when T said, oh, these go to such craft because they were requested, then you would be responsible to see they didn't go anywhere else. If you really read that note and you listened to what T said. Now, someone else said that a feeling came in of not, in other words, as the crew was discussing it, they were so cautious and afraid of accusing others of saying other things. They were walking on eggshells, so about not wanting to make waves, that the instructions that were given were not carried out. And we wanted to make a lesson that it's extremely a distortion of your conduct to think that you should be so preoccupied with not making waves as to not see your responsibility through. In other words, each of you must become more responsible. If it's your task to read notes, you should read them carefully. You should remember them. If you're a retreat crew, then you act as a unit. You get your all heads together when you make a decision, and there's the time to remember. I saw that note requesting these. There's the time to remember that T had said these go to such and such craft. Instead, you were more preoccupied with the thought of not making waves and should we divide these up? Plus, letting the vehicles, lights and dislikes getting in and override on, oh, these would be nice, and our craft, some of these as well as yours, and many times Link has divided things up. But the thing we want to impress upon you is to become more responsible. when you are a check partner and you sign your name to something, don't be a hypocrite. Don't be what is it don't be I can't think of the word, but don't sign it if you haven't read every word of it and haven't seriously thought about it and agree and remember. If you've really, then that's a check partner. A check partner who just kind of assumes that what you're doing is right, and I glance over it and I trust you and it's right. It'd be better off not to have a check partner, because that's a mockery of the check partner system. And also, if you're a Sat3 or you're in the herb lab or any other task that you have, if it's part of your responsibility to read notes or to count these things or to check your list, if you do that haphazardly or think that others are going to do it more carefully and you're just kind of passively seeing them do it, you're growing genes that are extremely irresponsible. We want your genetic structure to be strong and responsible and to be above facing the problem, worrying about offending someone. That shouldn't even come in. You should have learned how to negotiate diplomatically enough with each other that you can be direct, even though you're saying I may be wrong in meaning it. But you've got to bring it up. You can't not bring something up that should be brought up because it was instruction, and not bring it up simply because you're afraid it might make waves. Am I saying things that... And there was something else you said a moment ago after we covered that topic that you talked these a moment about that I wanted to put on this. What was it? Can't remember. Okay, we'll think about it. We're going to talk to you more about, and more in depth about expanding your understanding of the genes and expanding your understanding of what is evil. Like, let's say, for example, take the word evil. What is evil? Is there a Satan? Now, these are things you can think about until we discuss it with you. If there is a Satan, who is he? Where is he? What does he promote? What does he do? Is there a network of communication between individuals who are of the same mind? Is there a network of communication, no matter whether that the same mind is high-level thinking or low-level thinking? Is there a radio communication between minds at whatever levels you choose to, whatever levels of frequency you choose to operate your receiver and transmitter on? And how pertinent is that? Another thing you could think about maybe would be, what did Jesus mean? And don't think this is religious. When he said, I and the Father are one. The Father is in me and I am in him. Have you really understood what we're saying when we said that you are our offspring? Now you still have the old concepts of reincarnation or life after death or the soul lives on and it's going to reach heaven. But you've got to convert that over to how the mind, isn't it the mind that we were talking about when we were talking about soul? Isn't it the mind that we were talking about that lives? Not the brain, but the mind. Isn't it the knowledge that lives? Well, if that knowledge lives, and don't you become one with your teachers and your teachers with their teachers? I mean one. If your thinking is the same and if you're operating on the same frequency. And even if it was possible to remove one, would that one be dead? I mean, it's impossible to kill that one because it's the mind, and the mind can't be killed. And even if that vehicle which housed that mind is killed, what happens to that mind? You're thinking about these things, okay? And this is not to take your mind off of what you're doing in your segment, but it's to bring you out of the primitive interpretation or logic that you have had concerning the mind and life and genes and the communication between genes. Want to say anything? No? Okay, we'll talk to you about those after you've thought about it. Okay?
I don't know if you all know this. We've said this, I think we've said it many times, but links is always, well, I'll speak for myself, and I feel like those two ways, but T is always asking for whatever has to happen, that it happen quickly, so that this task will be completed. Now, way back at the very beginning, when we could see gradually what things had to be done, in other words, step by step, we could see what had to be done for you all and even for ourselves. And so whenever we'd say that, we knew that it might be a long way down the road before the task would be completed. And so consequently, when we would ask it, medicine would come your way, but it wouldn't be really strong enough to push you out the door. And but now it seems like our influence in that direction is much stronger. In other words, the minute when we say, let's get this, let's let it all come down, just like whether it's coincidental or what, but just like the other day, I was really pushing in this direction, and I found out later Joe was too. And then one right after the other, the earthquake started happening. Now, and there was an earthquake only yesterday in California, in Eureka, 50 miles from Eureka. Of course, they're only small, but there have been several earthquakes. Now, they're all related to all of our work being here. In other words, the things that happen for you and the things that have to happen out in the world, they're all related. It's just different circumstances. And but the reason I want to tell you all about it is, as the medicine comes your way, don't take it on a level that is beneath you. In other words, try to keep your head above the water and don't let yourself drown, because Link becomes more emphatic in wanting you to learn these instructions. And we want you to become emphatic in learning the instructions. Take a responsibility. Really work hard to do whatever has been designed for you to do. And don't try not to allow yourself to be pushed out the door. Because I firmly believe that it might even become harder for you to stay in the right place. And you might, because we're bombarded over the things that happen in the craft. You know what I mean by that? In other words, as everybody is having trouble, just like the other night, one thing after the other was happening that may not have been as strongly felt by you all as it was felt by us. But when we feel this way, when we feel like that so much is happening that we can't take any more of it, then we feel like you all are feeling the same way, because we can take an awful lot. Can you see what I'm saying? So what we're, that little voice, that are those little genes that Doe was talking about, and we were talking about prior to this conversation, about how they might have been suppressed for so long, they're liable to come out now. And there may be 2 or 3 things that you have suppressed. And now might all want to surface at once. And when that happens, it's going to make you feel like, what am I doing here? I can't take any more of it. And what you want to do is take each one of those little voices one at a time and conquer them. And if it's like in pizza and wish you had a pizza, and realize that the pizzas are awful the way they're making them now. They're not as good as you remembered them.
But even if they were making them perfect, you would have risen above being able to zero in on that in that way.
Right. Or you have some kind of, I can't think of anything really, but any kind of thing that you really felt like you wish you had at one time. Going out on parties or which the parties are nothing new, unless you are into drugs and really fast kind of life. But the thing of it is, that might be what that little suppressed voice is telling you is really great, you know.
Yeah, or I think one that's probably one of the worst so-called demons of your genes is if I could only be alone. If I could only be where I could do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And it will leave that little old voice will even say, I could have good contact with the next level or God or whatever you want to call it. And I could just have peace instead of all this disturbance that I have, and of having to be so close to those that surround me with all their problems and keep me from being able to have a little quiet, a little peace. That to me is one area. I don't know if it strikes you all, but it's very common, and it's a real deceiving. It's a real deceitful booger.
But the thing that you want to remember is that we're warning you now, right? If you begin to have 1, 2, or 3, or half a dozen little voices come out, be aware of it. Be keen enough to know what is happening, and be thankful for it. Don't make it make you feel depressed or whatever it makes you feel like doing. Just like we said, we used the example of the hockey goalie. Well, this isn't exactly the same thing, because that little voice is going to come out and it's going to make you feel like that's what you want. And what you have to realize is that it isn't what you want, that you have chosen something else, that was something of another lifetime. In other words, that's something in your genes that really doesn't exist anymore. It's just like a memory that you had of something that may not even be exactly the way you remembered it. And so this is why I feel like it's important that you be aware of this at this time, so that if we don't want to let up on our saying, let everything happen. In other words, it's before they may have let only one thing come out to your attention, and now they might start letting several things come out that you need to work on. And you may feel like you're a ping pong ball being batted back and forth, you know, and you won't even know how to handle it. But let yourself be batted back and forth, and then stop it. And say, now wait a minute, this is doing nothing but causing me trouble. And it isn't anything that I really want. It's only what this vehicle thinks. So it isn't right to allow this to take advantage of. I'm not saying to listen to it. I'm talking about if you can't stop it, if you can't, the minute it comes to your attention, like, let's say you're in a grocery store, like you're a supply finder, you're in a grocery store, you see a magazine, and you think, oh, I'd like to look at that magazine. Supply finders are the ones that know this, but they know they have the instructions not to look at the magazine. Now, let's say that you see the magazine and you think, oh, I'd like to look at that magazine. And then you say, oh no, I'm not supposed to do that. But yet deep inside you still want to look at that magazine. Instead of counteracting it with thought, well, if there was something for me to read in those magazines, then it would be given to me to read. Then you aren't suppressed and say, be quiet, boy. I'm not supposed to read a magazine. Well, in other words, you're doing it only because you're not supposed to do it. Can you understand this? And this applies to anything. If you're riding in a car with somebody and you're on a shuttle run, and the thought enters your mind, I sure like being on this shuttle run with this individual. And then you think, oh, I'm not supposed to think that way. But yet inside you still feel that way. Instead of reasoning it out, this is beneath me. I don't have, members of the next level don't have thoughts like that. In other words, we don't look at things in that way. If we can go on a shuttle run without running into somebody or running into another car and getting somebody there on time and getting back on time, that's where our thoughts are. But to have thoughts on a level where you're thinking of it sure is nice to be with that person once in a while, you know what I mean? That is a lower level. And this is how you try to counteract those thoughts. But you don't try to counteract the thoughts by saying, that's not the way you're supposed to think. You can use that, but that's not the only way to use it. Can you understand that? Can you see how it will work 100% of the time? You might not to put it into practice. But this way, you're not suppressing something. You're converting the thought over into a higher thought. And you're doing it consciously, which makes it stick even better. Questions?
On these segments, some of you start to talk about something, and it leads to something else, which leads to something else, which leads to something else, and you've gone by that time completely astray from your topic. And that which means your thoughts weren't organized before you began. And by the time you get to the fourth thing that you've led to, you recognize that you're far afield, and so you try to wiggle your way back, justifying as you go along. In other words, if your segment, you can't let one thing you say make you think about something else, think about something else, think about something else, until you are just like you can't express yourself unless you can talk for 40 hours and hoping that maybe 10 of those will have something to say. You've got to be more organized before you begin. Otherwise, you certainly wouldn't turn it in. And certainly, if you can read it and see that it's just a lot of unnecessary rambling and you never really stated your topic, you never zeroed in on it, there's a lot of unnecessary things, then you should clean it up before you turn it in. You should get rid of the excess and the clumsy way of expressing yourself. Okay, we want you to force your genes to permit you to express yourself clearly in these ways. And if it's a difficult task, it'll be good for you, guarantee you.
In other words, if you're thinking of talking to Link about what you're writing down, it's easier because then you would be sticking to the subject. And So we
If there has to be in terminology, we said that would be understandable to humans.
Right. But I think if you look at it in this way.
I think some of you assume that when you say something, you assume that the possible human reader may not understand the background of the statement you just made. So then you start giving a background of why you would choose those words to make that statement. And then that leads to doing the same thing on the next statement and so forth. And you keep getting further and further away from what it is you're trying to say. Start up, sure.
Well, what I find this segment is so much similarity, and it's almost like sometimes I feel like read a statement over. And
Okay, let me turn this up.
That aside from that, that's been the only real force that has been any negative to you. Do you follow what we're saying? Is the pressure that you're applying. Because there's nothing that could work as successfully toward Maxi life as the conduct that you have tried to convert your thinking to and your actions to. Well, I just jump in.
I'm going to say to the one on the next one, just this.
Okay.
We want you all to examine what you all have been accumulating. In other words, remember not that long ago or some time ago we had you all get rid of all excess stuff that you had. We would like for you to check your little belongings and see if you haven't gradually increased little things here.
Personal.
Things, right. And we don't feel like individuals should have things in both back BCs, or all three BCs if you have three BCs. In other words, you have them in one little box. If you like your toothbrush, you have a toothbrush. If you have eyeglasses, you have them in one box. And we don't feel like any individual needs separate containers of things. Like, for instance, if you use Vaseline or whatever, orange page. So there should be a tube of that in each of the BC.
That wouldn't be your own,
So,
right? That's an example.
so that shouldn't be separate.
None of these should be things that you have your own.
Peroxide, alcohol, all those things you get from the stockpile. Okay? In other words, we don't want all these little bottles of things. If 35 people had all separate little containers of things, in each BC we would really be Sugar McGee closet of things. So what we were trying to set up at the time that we did all this was like you would have this, except there would be an area where you would go to get those things as you need them. And if you have any other source, if for some reason that doesn't work for you, then write to Link to let us know that so we can change it for you as an individual. Okay?
Okay.
To return?
And all the negative characteristics of the genes to become extremely active if you begin to accept negative thinking. If you begin to be down on yourself, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, or you're programming that. You're adding to the negativity that's already there.
Which means we have to overcome it.
And unfortunately, the negative grows much faster and more easily than the positive. Out of history has done it. Now, eventually that may turn around. But thus far it hasn't turned around.
Maybe you want to get to where you don't want to allow a single negative thought to come into your mind because it can color your dreams. And this is why you should be afraid to add anything negative to it.
If that thought enters your mind and you think about that thought, and even for that moment, believe